Hey guys, welcome back. BDC Care here. We're back with our weekly recap of all things Injustice. This is for the week of December 14th, 2023. The current character challenge is Raven. That is a 1-week repeat. The required characters for that are Wonder Woman, Nightwing, and Flash, who you can get at Silver, Bronze, and Bronze respectively if you're looking at the lowest tier. Each of them are available, so relatively easy for a newer player. Her passive is Demonic Rage, which is twice per match when Raven is below 20% health. She swaps her health with her opponent, and then bosses are protected. She's got 1,050 attack and 1,000 health, and was last available on the 16th of February, 2023.
Alright, so if we look at her in the context of the current game, she's got lowish kind of stats. But she is still a great card. She was one of the first who had a passive or just an overall ability that had an impact on fight strategy. So if you want to put it another way, that's game changing. Although that phrase gets used a lot, it's a bit of a cliche. And despite not having great stats, her health swap passive is still super useful. She really shines in Survivor. You can see her in the video we did a few years ago, more than a few years ago, on how to beat Survivor. Link in the description. So swapping health makes the biggest difference when your opponent's health pool is much bigger than your own, because you swap based on the bar, not on just the health number. So the key to taking advantage of her passive is making sure her health lands at some point between 0 and 20% in order to trigger it. So on the flip side, if you're fighting against her, the best way to manage her passive and not trigger it is to take her from more than 20% health to knockout in one hit.
Yeah.
If your team is good enough, I mean, that's one strategy you use, but if your team is good enough, you can just go ahead and trigger it twice. The first trigger is going to hurt because she takes your health, and then you're all of a sudden less than 20%. But if you use the same character to bring her health down again, either the second health swap just doesn't do anything because the margin is so much smaller.
Yeah.
Or it happens with such little health that it being swapped, it has no impact on the fight.
Mm-hmm.
So just a few other interesting things about her. She's one of the characters that did not have a breakthrough for ages. So having the option to bring her up to level 60 Elite 10 makes up for, I think, really any perceived deficiency in her stats.
Mm-hmm.
She was one of the earliest gold cards to have multiple hits on Combo Ender to take advantage of Combo Ender effects on gears. And you see that her passive where it says bosses are protected, that did not used to be the case. Didn't even say it. And the health swap passive worked great against everybody.
Mm-hmm.
So this is an example where they nerf somebody.
But also it doesn't make that big of a difference in most contexts.
No, I don't think so. I think most of the bosses are pretty easy to handle with that kind of the full roster, your options. Yeah.
It just maybe makes it a little slower if you have her, but not that many other good folks.
Yeah, so, all that stuff, she's not so much that she's harder to use, but her passive is harder to take advantage outside of Survivor when your overall roster gets better. Because I don't even want to say the best part of her, the most unique part of her is her health swap passive. And the best scenario for that passive is for her to take a lot of health from her opponent when it triggers, right? The way that you normally wouldn't be able to do. Like, you don't want to do health swap against, it's not you don't. Health swap against a bronze character isn't as useful.
Yeah, well, because really the issue is that if you can just whittle them down, then you're trying to trigger her passive. You either are beating them up and trying to kill them, or you're trying to trigger her passive to its most effective, which involves you not beating them up and just letting them beat you up and get your health down low.
Right.
And so most cases, it makes more sense to still try to attack the other person. And so that makes her passive a lot less useful.
Yeah. I mean, there's lots of scenarios where passive isn't great, especially if you're trying to take advantage of it. It feels differently when you're fighting against her. Because if you're using the rest of your team, or actually, if you're using anybody on your team, even Raven, for your main damage output, if your team is good, by the time Raven's passive triggers, you're not taking back a lot of health.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're trying to use your health swap to take down the other team, the time that it takes to let her health drop, it's usually not worth it when you're facing the team that's about the same strength as yours or even a little bit higher. It just takes too long. You're better off. So what you're watching in this fight is Raven being the Special 2 specialist.
Mm-hmm.
And she's super effective, actually, despite her having lower stats than Rebirth Raven. So you know that we're fighting characters that are significantly more powerful, but she's still really effective if you just straight up use her like a character with no passive. And so the reason why her health passive works so much better in Survivor, right, is that the later fight opponents have a huge health pool. The swap is in percentages, right, the health bar, so you can reduce the opponent to less than 20% health while picking up to 100% again. And so that's sort of the classical way people have been doing it. And that's sort of the point of why we're doing it a little bit differently, partly because that's sort of our plan for the challenge, but also just to show you how good Raven can be. Her special 2 does a decent amount of damage. It's no different than other characters where we don't try to play it to their passive, but they're good enough in other ways to make up for it. In Raven's case, her special 2 is multi-hit, can knock out more than one opponent, and it's ranged enough that if you're using Master's Death card, you don't need to wait before starting your special 2 when you tag in. You just use it right away. The first few hits, there's a bunch of hits in her special 2 that are grouped, so that if one of the early hits knocks them out, then you won't get the benefit of all of them. But the last hit has a big gap from the rest of the hits. It has a pause. And that last hit does a decent amount of damage, so that you get the benefit of it if you happen to knock out the opponents not on the last hit.
Yeah.
So I think, yeah, the first fight is really fun because all the times that I've tried to play her to use her passive, the fight seems to drag, and sometimes I screw up. But when you just play her straight up and you sort of happen to trigger her passive accidentally, it's kind of fun. It's a nice bonus.
Not bad.
Still relevant, despite being a really old character, lowish stats. That's, to me, that's like the perfect character design, right?
Yeah.
She's not like anybody else. She's got an interesting passive, and she's still useful.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So there we go. With the current challenge cycle, we expect next week's challenge to be Earth 2 Solomon Grundy. And this week's multiplayer reward is Arkham Origins Deadshot, whose passive is Trick Shot, which is bullets from Deadshot's sniper rifle and wrist guns ricochet, dealing damage to all characters on the enemy team. And when Arkham allies are in combat, each 10 seconds, Deadshot will shoot the enemy with an electrified round, draining the enemy power. He's got 1,450 attack and 1,250 health. He was last available on the 11th of May 2023, based off of the multiplayer reward cycle. Next week, we expect to see Mother Box.
So this is a good example of high stats, right? Like, I think his total stat pool, health and attack combined, is, I think, about 30%, more than 30% higher than Raven's.
Yeah.
That's a lot. So the first part of his passive makes him a good offensive character. It's the splash damage that works both with his basic damage and also with his specialist. His basic tap attacks will shoot bullets, and both his specials have bullets. In the tap combo, the first hit is a punch, second hit is a shot from his wrist cannon. Half the time, he goes into his third hit, and half the time, you can just repeat his first and second hit over and over like a constant kind of infinite juggle, but eventually it completes.
Yeah.
You keep on doing that. So it's a good offensive passive in general. It doesn't matter if you're using him as a special specialist or as a basic damage dealer. So that's kind of interesting. What else can we say about him? If you want to really lean into it, Batman Ninja Joker can add more splash damage without using up any gear slots. The problem, though, is sometimes we get carried away, right? So aside from characters like Batgirl and Luchador Bane, where you can leverage the special 1 damage and boost it to ridiculous levels, special 2 in general is more useful for splash damage because special 1 just doesn't do enough. Batgirl and Luchador Bane are exceptions to that because the stun boosted damage of Cloak and Necron Scythe, plus being able to stun before or right after the start of special 1, means Batgirl and Luchador Bane can generate way more special 1 damage than anyone else. And the 50% splash damage you get on League of Assassins Knives on a special 1 is much higher than what you can get from, say, Fourth World Godly Mace, which is 15% splash damage on special 2. And that, in normal circumstances, makes sense because special 2 does way more damage. And it seems too much to have that high percentage of splash from the special 2. But Batgirl and Luchador Bane are funky kind of exceptions with the exact right gear loadout. So it sounds great. In practice, if you're used to back row Luchador Bane, it feels like it's not enough. The second part of his passive can potentially drain 1.5 bars of power every 10 seconds. So it becomes even more important in fights when you're facing his teammate. So if Deadshot is on a team but he's not facing you, you want to knock out his teammate as quickly as possible so he doesn't have a chance to drain you while he's off screen.
Yeah.
I mean, this is the whole principle that we stick to, where higher offensive output trumps any kind of defensive benefit, right?
For sure.
I think if you're creating a team and you have the choice between the two, if the effect is close enough, then it's almost always better to make your team just do more damage faster. So we've done a series of videos on him. It's linked in the description. It's taking on multiplayer as a basic damage dealer, as a special specialist, and then as that very niche kind of special specialist where we're trying to maximize splash damage.
Yeah, he fits almost every role.
Right. Part of what makes him really good, actually, is his Arkham status. It gives you a chance to take advantage of Arkham Knight Batgirl as a teammate and general Arkham synergy. So, I mean, let's be honest, every Arkham character is better because Arkham Knight Batgirl exists. This is an appreciation of Arkham Knight Batgirl, even though this is not her week. It's the same way every Flashpoint character is better because Flashpoint Batman exists. And I think Blackest Night Flash makes that Blackest Night team just that much more dangerous. Any of the other Blackest Night characters, it doesn't matter as much, but if Blackest Night Flash is on team, then you gotta be generally a lot more careful. Yeah.
So there we go. Moving on to the store, we've got the Earth 2 Solomon Grundy pack for $24.99 Canadian. All prices are going to be Canadian because that's the info that we have access to. It's a corroborating clue to next week. It doesn't come with credits, so it's especially overpriced. It's the most expensive version of the challenge character pack, and normally at this price it comes with 100,000 power credits. So even though it's never a good deal, it's like extra bad deal now.
Yeah.
We also have the Icebreaker pack also for $24.99 Canadian. It's been that price last couple times it's been around, and that comes with Killer Frost, Regime Killer Frost, and Luchador Bane, who are all challenge characters. So for the same price, you're getting 3 instead of 1.
Yeah.
And not the one that's going to be next week.
Right. And I should I think I missed this last week because when I went into the game, it showed that there was 2 new packs. Those are clearly new packs. And this one was not marked as new, but I think I might have missed mentioning this in last week. It's the Character Bundle Rebirth team. So maybe it's the second week. You get Rebirth Wally West and Rebirth Green Arrow. Not an awful pack. Same price, $24.99. You only get 2 characters instead. But Wally West is an interesting one. I still have trouble with Rebirth Green Arrow trying to make him relevant.
Yeah.
Rebirth Wally West is kind of fun, but maybe I'm just partial to flashes.
So there we go. Phantom Zone is finished. Fight 62 still broken, has been for years now. And last weekend's breakthrough for golds was Killer Croc, Harley Quinn, and Martian Manhunter. So this coming weekend it should be Hawkgirl, Green Lantern, and Lobo. Link in the description to a thread from Devlin16 that goes over the complete breakthrough cycle if you want to track that yourself.
Right. So as far as current glitches go, we will go into more detail every time something significant changes, which did not happen this week. However, even if nothing changes, we still do a more detailed review once a month, the first week of every month. Most recently, that was our recap from just last week, December 7th, 2023. The one thing worth mentioning is that the challenge reset glitch has been confirmed to be working on this week's Raven challenge.
So there we go. To finish up, we'd like to give a huge thank you to all the lovely folks who support us on Patreon. That's Michael Devries, Irvin, Ruiz, Hoshi127, and Nora Klimek, who are supporting us on the credited level, and the name scrolling past now, who supported us at some point during the pandemic. Thank you so much for your support. Thanks so much to all of you for watching. We'll see you next time.
Komoda.